The aircraft hummed with the steady, almost soothing rhythm of a long-haul flight that had settled into its quietest hours. At 37,000 feet, the world below no longer existed, only darkness, clouds, and the illusion of safety that commercial cabins were built to provide. The overhead lights were dimmed to a muted blue, casting soft shadows over sleeping passengers. Heads leaned against windows. Mouths hung slightly open. Blankets rose and fell in slow, careless breaths. But the woman in row 8, seat B, was not truly asleep. Her body rested back against the seat, chin tilted just enough to suggest exhaustion. Her hands lay folded loosely in her lap, fingers relaxed, palms open. To anyone passing by, she looked like another anonymous traveler trying to outrun jet lag. Yet her breathing was too even, too controlled. It wasn't the deep, sloppy rhythm of real sleep. It was measured, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, trained into muscle memory over years when survival depended on mastering fear. Her boarding pass, tucked into the seat pocket, read Emily Carter. Age 33. Occupation, consultant. Nationality, American. Unremarkable in every way. No one on that plane knew how carefully that name had been chosen. The flight attendant moving down the aisle slowed when she reached row 8. She didn't know why. Something subtle tugged at her attention, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. The woman's posture was relaxed but not careless. Her head wasn't slumped like the others. Her shoulders weren't slack. The attendant hesitated for half a second longer than necessary. Then the woman's eyelids fluttered, just barely. Not opening. Just enough to confirm awareness. The attendant felt a strange chill creep up her arms. She offered a quiet smile no one saw and continued down the aisle, telling herself she was tired, imagining things. She didn't notice the way the woman's fingers shifted slightly, adjusting position as if marking distance. She didn't notice the tiny scar at the base of her thumb, thin, pale, and old. In the cockpit, the captain leaned forward as a small red indicator pulsed on the auxiliary panel. Once, then again. His co-pilot frowned. "You seeing that?" The captain nodded slowly. "Yeah, that shouldn't be active." They exchanged a glance. The kind pilots shared only when something didn't fit the checklist. "I'll call it in," the co-pilot said. The captain hesitated. Then he reached for the intercom, but stopped short as another alert appeared, not from the aircraft. From something else. Behind a secured door near the rear galley, 6 men who did not belong on commercial flights felt their phones vibrate at the same time. No sound, no light. Just a silent signal. Each of them checked instinctively, shielding the screen with a palm. Target VRIFIED. Cabin location confirmed. The message contained no name. It didn't need one. The men rose in unison, not abruptly, not dramatically. They moved the way predators did when closing distance, smooth, efficient, unnoticed. They had boarded separately, different tickets, different covers. One was a software contractor, another a medical equipment sales rep. One claimed he was flying home from a funeral. None of that mattered now. The past dissolved instantly. Training took over. The team leader, seated 2 rows behind row 8, lifted his eyes slowly and locked onto the woman in seat B. His jaw tightened. He knew that posture. Years ago, half a world away, he'd seen it in a dust-filled briefing room where the walls shook from distant explosions. He remembered being told she was a civilian asset, temporary, non-combatant. They'd been wrong. The men began to move. One step, then another. No one noticed at first. Passengers were lost in dreams, movies paused mid-scene, headphones sealing them off from reality. But the woman in row 8 noticed everything. She counted footsteps. 6 sets. She mapped angles without opening her eyes, reflections in the darkened window, shadows cast by bodies blocking the aisle lights, the faint change in air pressure as someone stopped too close. Her heart rate didn't spike. It slowed. So this is how, she thought calmly. A faint memory surfaced. Cold rain, radio static, a voice screaming her call sign before cutting out forever. The men were close now. Too close for coincidence. The team leader raised 2 fingers, a silent command to confirm before contact. That's when her left hand twitched. Barely an inch. But every man surrounding row 8 saw it. And every one of them froze. Because it wasn't a random movement. It was a signal. Old. Obsolete. Officially erased from training manuals. But unmistakable to anyone who had been there. The team leader felt his throat go dry. No way, someone breathed under his breath. The woman's breathing shifted, just enough to tell them she knew exactly where they were. Her eyelids opened. Slowly. Deliberately. Her eyes were clear, sharp, awake. They locked onto the team leader first. Recognition passed between them like a shockwave. Not surprise. Not fear. Memory. She didn't scream. Didn't flinch. Didn't reach for anything. She simply looked at him and spoke softly, her voice barely above the hum of the engines. "You're late." And in that instant, standing in the narrow aisle of a commercial airplane, the Navy SEALs understood something that made their blood run cold. The woman in row 8 hadn't been hiding from them. She had been waiting. And somewhere beneath their feet, unseen and unheard, a system quietly changed its status from dormant to active for half a second after she spoke. No one moved. "You're late." 2 simple words, calm, almost polite. Yet every Navy SEAL surrounding row 8 felt the same involuntary reaction, muscles tightening, instincts screaming. Those words didn't belong to a civilian caught off guard. They belonged to someone who had been tracking time, distance, probability. The team leader recovered first. He had spent years mastering the art of control, over fear, over chaos, over himself. He forced his face into neutrality and subtly signaled his men to hold position. Passengers nearby stirred. Someone shifted in their seat. A man across the aisle snored, oblivious. The leader leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice to blend with the engine noise. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "we need to speak with you." Her eyes flicked not to him but past him, a quick scan, left aisle, right aisle, rear galley reflection in the polished surface of a service cart. She cataloged them instantly. 6. 2 forward, 2 aft, one pretending to read a magazine 3 rows up, one standing just close enough to block escape. Professionals. She exhaled slowly, as if annoyed rather than threatened. "On a plane," she murmured, "you guys always did have terrible timing." The SEAL nearest the aisle clenched his jaw. He remembered that voice now, not softer, not louder. Exactly the same as it had been through a crackling radio years ago, moments before everything went wrong. "Confirm identity," the leader whispered into his collar mic. Another SEAL leaned in under the pretense of adjusting an overhead bin, his eyes fixed on her face, searching for doubt, fear, denial. There was none. Instead, there was recognition. Not of him, but of what he represented. He swallowed. "It's her." The confirmation rippled through the team like an electric current. Her file had been buried, sealed, classified beyond reach. She was a ghost story whispered during late-night deployments, the civilian asset who outplayed everyone and vanished. The one command never liked to discuss. The leader straightened. "Emily Carter," he said carefully, testing the name. Her mouth twitched. "That's what it says," she replied. "Congratulations, you can read." The man across the aisle frowned, finally sensing tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "Yes, sir," one SEAL said smoothly, flashing a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a routine check." The man nodded uncertainly and turned away. "Routine." The woman almost laughed. She shifted in her seat, slowly unbuckling her seatbelt. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin, click, and several passengers glanced over. The SEALs tensed. "Easy," the leader said. "I am," she replied. "You're the ones crowding my legroom." She stood. Not abruptly, not defiantly. She rose the way someone did when stretching stiff muscles after a long flight. But the moment she was upright, the difference was unmistakable. She wasn't tall, she wasn't imposing. But she was balanced. Every ounce of her weight was placed deliberately, center of gravity perfectly aligned. Hands open, shoulders relaxed, a posture designed to look harmless and act deadly. The leader felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. "On knees." "We'd like you to come with us," he said. She tilted her head. "That's funny." He frowned. "What is?" "The last time someone said that," she replied softly, "it ended with 3 flags folded and handed to families who never got the truth." That landed hard. The leader's expression tightened. "You disappeared after Kiev." Her eyes hardened instantly, like steel beneath glass. "You disappeared first," she said. "I just adapted." A baby began to cry somewhere behind them. A flight attendant froze near the galley, sensing that something was deeply wrong but lacking the authority or courage to intervene. The woman took a step into the aisle. The SEALs adjusted unconsciously, forming a loose perimeter around her. To passengers, it looked like polite assistance. To anyone trained, it was containment. She noticed. "Relax," she said quietly. "If I wanted to hurt someone, we wouldn't be talking." The team leader held her gaze. "You've been off the grid for 7 years." She smiled without warmth. "No, I've been left off it." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice further. "You're coming with us." "Am I?" she asked. "Or are you just following orders without knowing why?" That hit a nerve. The leader hesitated, a fraction too long. Her eyes flicked downward. Under her seat. A faint red glow reflected briefly against the metal rail. Gone as quickly as it appeared. The SEAL closest to her noticed it too. "What's under the seat?" he demanded. She followed his gaze, then looked back up unfazed. "Insurance," she said. The leader stiffened. "Is that a threat?" She shook her head. "It's a reminder." The plane jolted suddenly, clear air turbulence, sharp enough to send gasps through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled. Someone screamed. In the cockpit, warning tones chimed. The captain grabbed the controls. "That's not weather." Back in the cabin, the woman steadied herself effortlessly, as if anticipating the movement. "You feel that?" she asked calmly. The SEALs exchanged quick looks. "Feel what?" the leader asked. She met his eyes. "Someone just realized you found me." Another jolt hit harder. The fasten seatbelt sign flashed on. Passengers shouted now, fear rippling through the cabin like a wave. The woman stepped closer to the leader, close enough that only he could hear her. "If you're smart," she whispered, "you'll stop treating me like the target." His pulse hammered. "Then what are you?" he asked. Her gaze drifted to the ceiling, then back to him. "The reason this flight might not land if we keep pretending everything is under control." The red glow beneath her seat pulsed again, brighter this time. And in the cockpit, an unfamiliar system status quietly shifted from monitoring to engage. The cabin had transformed. What once felt like a routine late-night flight now throbbed with tension. Passengers sensed it instinctively, the subtle vibrations of fear, the quiet hum of something wrong that no announcement could explain. But Emily Carter, known to the world as a civilian consultant, had felt this coming long before anyone else. Her body had been conditioned to notice these micro-changes. The flutter of cabin air as someone moved too quickly, the shadow shifting across the aisle, the quiet metallic click of shoes on linoleum that weren't supposed to be there. Her breathing stayed slow, measured, an anchor in the middle of chaos. Her eyelids closed briefly, but it wasn't sleep. It was calculation. She counted footsteps, 6 distinct sets approaching with precision, each one carrying the weight of someone trained for lethal efficiency. She tracked their distances, velocities, and angles without opening her eyes. Every movement was catalogued, every shift noted. Not air marshals, not passengers, professionals. Her fingers twitched once subtly. That was enough. The men froze mid-step. They knew the signal, one she had used only once before on a hostile airstrip in Eastern Europe, a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. The SEAL closest to her seat knew that twitch meant awareness, recognition, and caution. Her mind drifted briefly to Kiev. That operation had ended in fire and betrayal. Orders had been ignored, allies lost, and she had vanished, presumed dead. She had been hunted by both friend and foe, but she had survived, always. Now, sitting upright in a commercial airliner, she realized they were not here to arrest her. They were here to retrieve her, or eliminate her if necessary. The team leader signaled silently, and the SEALs continued their approach, slow, careful, professional. They were skilled, trained to think ahead, but none of them had faced her in years, and the years had only sharpened her instincts. Passengers nearby stirred but remained unaware of the danger. A man in row 10 dropped his phone, picking it up lazily. A child whimpered in row 12. To them, the tension was invisible, just another part of flying at night. Emily opened her eyes. They were calm but piercing. They scanned the aisle like a predator evaluating the prey that thought it had them trapped. She didn't panic. She didn't flinch. She merely assessed. Angles, distances, weak points. The SEALs closed the last few feet. The team leader paused, his eyes narrowing. "Emily Carter," he said quietly, "we need you to come with us." She tilted her head slightly, her hair falling in a casual arc over one shoulder. "You mean Raven," she said. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, yet it carried the weight of command. "I haven't been Emily Carter in a long time." The name hit the team leader like a punch. Raven. That was the call sign buried in the files he had sworn never to open again. Raven, the civilian who had outsmarted entire units, walked away from impossible situations and disappeared from every record. One SEAL's hand twitched toward his belt, a reflexive motion, but the team leader held him back. Raven rose fully to her feet, calm, deliberate, and every movement carried purpose. She wasn't threatening, at least not overtly, yet her presence radiated control, the kind of control that made trained men hesitate. Passengers glanced up now. Some noticed a quiet tension. Some whispered to each other, sensing something unusual. None could know that the calm woman standing in the aisle had been trained to handle far worse than a minor turbulence or a nervous flight. The team leader leaned slightly closer, his voice low, meant only for her. "We didn't come here for a conversation. You're coming with us." Raven's eyes flicked downward for a fraction of a second, calculating, assessing. There it was. Beneath her seat, a faint red light blinked, almost imperceptibly. She smiled just enough for the SEALs to notice. "Do I look like someone who needs to be escorted?" she asked softly. The SEAL nearest the aisle caught her subtle smirk, the one that betrayed the tiniest hint of amusement. He didn't like it, not one bit. Raven's mind raced ahead. This plane, these SEALs, the blinking device, everything was connected. Years of experience had trained her to anticipate contingencies, and right now she had one priority: survival and leverage. She shifted her weight slightly, testing the SEALs' reaction. Instantly, their body language adjusted. professionals responding to a subtle cue. Perfect. She made mental notes: who was more aggressive, who would hesitate under pressure, who would obey orders blindly. The turbulence intensified. The cabin shuddered, passengers gripped armrests, and over the intercom the captain's voice came with forced calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing unexpected turbulence." It wasn't just turbulence. Raven knew it instantly. The aircraft's systems were reacting to more than atmospheric instability. Something else was triggering the plane's sensors. Something dangerous. She turned her gaze back to the SEAL team. The leader's eyes narrowed. He spoke again, his tone firmer. "Raven, come with us, now." Her smile disappeared. Calm eyes became hard, sharp. She leaned slightly toward him, voice lowered to a whisper meant only for the leader. "If you think this is about me walking into your hands, you're wrong. You don't even know what's on this plane." The blinking red light beneath her seat pulsed faster. She felt it, a subtle vibration transmitted through the metal floor, signaling that whatever had been dormant was now active. The team leader's heart skipped. He knew immediately this was no ordinary mission. This was bigger than any of them had anticipated. Passengers began to stir nervously, unaware that they were mere extras in a confrontation between ghosts, killers, and one woman who had survived what no one else could. Raven's fingers brushed lightly over the device under her seat. Her mind raced. She had seconds, maybe less, to assess, act, and survive. The SEALs moved closer. One step, another, professional, controlled, predictable. She tilted her head, letting her hair fall like a curtain over her shoulder, hiding her expression just enough to keep them guessing. And then quietly, almost imperceptibly, she whispered to herself, "Let's see who really survives this flight." In that instant, the calm, sleeping woman in row 8 became the most dangerous person on the plane. And somewhere deep in the aircraft systems, the red light turned solid. The cabin had become a stage, every movement amplified. The soft hum of the engines no longer provided comfort. It was a backdrop for something much darker. Passengers shifted uneasily, sensing the tension but unable to pinpoint the danger. Only row 8 was alive with it, like a heartbeat skipping in slow motion. Raven, Emily Carter, stood fully upright now. She had not rushed, not lunged, not drawn attention to herself. But the SEALs surrounding her were taut, ready, alert. Every muscle in their trained bodies screamed that she was more than a civilian. The team leader stepped closer, keeping his voice low and controlled. "Raven, come with us," he said again. Her eyes locked onto his, calm, calculated. A shadow of amusement danced across her face. "You're blocking the aisle," she said softly. Her tone was polite, almost conversational, but every word carried the weight of command. The leader felt a shiver run down his spine. In all his years of service, in countless operations where civilians became targets or pawns, he had never seen someone command without force, using only presence. "Ma'am," he began, "we just need to get you out safely." She tilted her head, letting her dark hair fall into her eyes. "Out safely," she repeated. "The last time you said that, I ended up on a blacked-out airstrip alone, with nothing but a gun and a choice between life and death. Tell me, what makes you think this time will be any different?" The words struck him like bullets. He knew the truth of what she said. They had all lost people during Kiev. Orders had been ignored, plans had collapsed, and the team had been forced to leave her behind, presumed dead. Raven had vanished. No trace, no record, no official acknowledgement. "She's telling the truth," the SEAL closest to the aisle whispered under his breath. The leader didn't respond. Instead, he scanned the cabin. Passengers were beginning to murmur now, sensing the unusual tension. No one knew the stakes. No one knew the danger. No one except row 8. Raven shifted her weight slightly, testing reactions. Every SEAL adjusted instinctively, their training kicking in. Containment, calm, control. And then, just for a fraction of a second, her eyes flicked downward. Under her seat, the small red glow blinked again. The leader noticed it instantly. His stomach tightened. That glow wasn't part of any commercial system. It wasn't a passenger device. It was hers. "What's under the seat?" he asked sharply, keeping his voice low. Raven looked at him as if reading the question in slow motion. She gave a faint, almost playful smile. "Insurance," she said. A flicker of doubt crossed the leader's face. Insurance? Against what? Against whom? The seal closest to her hand moved subtly, instinctively preparing for worst-case scenarios. "Is that a threat?" he asked. She shook her head. "A reminder," she replied, calm, measured, deadly. The plane jolted, turbulence or something else. The sudden movement caused a passenger to scream, a child to whimper, and a cup to tip over, spilling coffee across the aisle. The cabin was a tableau of panic, but Raven remained perfectly balanced, her feet planted, her hands relaxed. Her mind raced. She had prepared for this moment, trained for this exact scenario. The SEALs were professionals, excellent, deadly, but predictable, and predictability was a vulnerability she could exploit. The leader stepped closer. "Raven, we can't negotiate. We need you to come with us." She smiled faintly, the calm shifting to something more dangerous. "Come with you," she echoed. Her eyes scanned the aisle, taking in every subtle movement, every micro-expression. "You think I'm walking into your hands. You don't even know what's on this plane." The seal stiffened. The blinking light beneath her seat intensified, pulsing faster. It wasn't just a warning. It was active, ready, dangerous. Raven's gaze darted toward the cockpit briefly. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain calm." It wasn't just turbulence. Raven knew instantly. The aircraft's systems were being manipulated. Someone or something had triggered a reaction that put the plane at risk. She turned back to the team leader. Her voice dropped to a whisper meant only for him. "If you think this is about me being escorted, you're wrong. This plane could end up anywhere if we keep pretending everything is normal." The leader's heart skipped. He knew what she meant. This wasn't a routine extraction. This wasn't a capture. This was a mission far beyond their understanding. The seal closest to her side shifted slightly, testing distance, testing reaction. Raven tilted her head and watched every move. She cataloged aggression, hesitation, compliance. All of it would be useful later. Passengers nearby whispered, glanced around nervously. None could comprehend the storm in row 8. To them it was merely tension. To the SEALs it was a warning, and to Raven it was an opportunity. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly, more to herself than anyone else. "Something just realized you found me." The leader swallowed, a flash of fear crossing his eyes. He wasn't used to uncertainty. Not in his career, not in any mission. Yet here he was, facing a woman whose reputation alone could topple operations. The turbulence intensified. Overhead bins rattled. A sudden lurch made passengers grip their armrests. The captain's voice came again, more urgent. "Cabin crew, take your seats immediately. Passengers remain fastened." Raven's balance remained perfect, calm, measured, controlled. Her eyes flicked once more to the blinking red light beneath her seat. Faster, brighter, active. She whispered almost inaudibly, but the seal nearest her heard. "Let's see who really survives this flight." The leader's eyes narrowed. He had faced countless threats, seen the impossible and survived. But nothing prepared him for this. A civilian in appearance, a legend in reality, standing in the aisle of a commercial plane, in full control of a situation he didn't understand. And somewhere in the electronics beneath row 8, the systems quietly shifted. What had been dormant was now fully engaged. The SEALs exchanged tense glances. Everyone knew, without saying a word, that this was no longer about escorting Raven. This was now a game of survival, one that none of them could predict, and only one person controlled entirely. Raven adjusted her stance, eyes scanning the cabin once more. Calm, lethal, waiting. The first move had been made, and the plane, unknowingly carrying hundreds of passengers, was about to become the most dangerous place on Earth. The cabin had gone from quiet hum to a tense, living entity. Every passenger was oblivious, yet the atmosphere was thick with unspoken danger. Raven, Emily Carter, moved with the precision of a predator, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The SEALs flanked her like shadows, ready for any sudden motion, but she was calm, too calm. Her eyes scanned the rows, calculating angles, evaluating threats, noting exits, and estimating reaction times. She was professional, composed, and dangerous. The team leader leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Raven, this is not a negotiation. Come with us, now." She let a faint smile curve her lips, almost imperceptible. "A negotiation? That's funny," she said softly. "The last time I negotiated, the mission failed, allies were lost, and someone tried to bury the truth." The SEAL closest to her tensed, his hand hovering near his holster. He had heard stories of her exploits, legends whispered in secret briefings. Ghost stories of the civilian asset who could walk into hostile compounds, disappear, and leave nothing but chaos behind. The thought of facing her now, in the confines of a commercial plane, sent a shiver down his spine. Passengers were beginning to notice the tension. A man in row 12 glanced over nervously. A child whimpered in row 14. A flight attendant froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene. But none could see what Raven saw, what the SEALs felt, what the red glow beneath her seat represented. Raven crouched slightly, her eyes flicking toward the blinking device. The red light pulsed faster now. Not just a warning, not just a signal. It was a countdown, not in time but in consequence. The leader motioned subtly to his men. "Contain her. Don't engage unless necessary." They adjusted their positions, encircling her in a near-perfect perimeter. Their movements were silent, synchronized, professionals, trained killers, predictable. Raven's lips twitched just barely. She tilted her head, letting a single strand of hair fall over her eye. "You think you're prepared for this," she said softly, "but you have no idea what's coming." One SEAL swallowed hard. He remembered Kiev. He remembered how she had vanished after that mission, leaving them to believe she was dead. How she had outwitted everyone, disappeared into the shadows, and resurfaced only when it suited her. "She's bluffing," one whispered to another. The team leader shook his head imperceptibly. "No, she's not." Raven straightened, reaching under her seat. Her fingers brushed the metal case she had placed there, lightly, almost casually. The SEALs tensed further, instincts screaming. She lifted the case, revealing a sleek black device. No wires, no obvious timer, just a biometric lock. She held it carefully, like a fragile but deadly artifact. "This plane isn't the target," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "I am." The SEALs froze. The leader stepped closer. "Who sent you?" he asked, trying to mask his growing unease. "No one," she replied, calm, precise, terrifying. "That's the problem." The turbulence hit again, harder this time. Overhead bins rattled. A child screamed. Coffee splashed across the aisle, but Raven remained steady. Her grip on the device never faltered. She pressed a small button on the side. A soft beep, barely audible over the engine hum. The red light beneath her seat shifted from pulsing to solid. The leader's eyes widened. What is that?" Raven didn't answer. Instead, her phone vibrated, a secure, encrypted line. She glanced at it briefly. "Caller ID, unknown, priority 1." Her expression hardened. She swiped the screen, answered. The voice that came through was calm, authoritative, chilling. "Raven, we see you." The SEALs exchanged glances. The voice was familiar. one that had pulled strings behind the scenes, manipulating operations no one dared to question. A ghost in the system, a shadow in the intelligence world. Raven's eyes narrowed. "So it begins," she whispered. The voice continued, "You still have the data." Raven's jaw tightened. The memory hit her instantly. The mission in Kiev, the betrayal, the files she had recovered, the proof that could dismantle the network that had tried to bury everything. "Yes," she said softly, "I have it, but if I use it—" Her eyes swept the cabin, lingering on the innocent passengers. "This plane could end up anywhere, and it won't be a drill." The leader stepped closer, voice barely audible. "Then call them off." Raven's gaze swept over him, steady and piercing. "I've been left off the grid for 7 years. If I'm forced to act, it won't be a warning. It'll be a message." Outside the plane, the lights of 2 unmarked fighter jets appeared, close enough that their outlines were visible against the night sky. No insignia, no identification, just sleek, deadly, and following. The SEALs stiffened. Their world had always been black and white, friend or foe. Now lines blurred. The plane was their battlefield. The woman in the aisle was their wild card, and the device beneath her seat was unknown. Raven held the device up slightly, just enough for the team leader to see. The red light glowed ominously. She spoke softly, almost a whisper meant for him alone. "This is why I never trusted anyone fully. This is why I survived when you didn't." The turbulence shook the plane again. Passengers screamed. A coffee cup flew across the aisle. A child clung to their mother, eyes wide with terror, but Raven remained calm, perfectly poised. The SEALs adjusted instinctively, forming a tighter perimeter. The leader's mind raced. Every option, every contingency, every potential outcome. None of them guaranteed success. Raven's eyes flicked to the cockpit briefly, then back. Her expression was unreadable, calm, calculated, deadly. "You can walk away," she said softly to the SEALs. "Right now, before it's too late." The leader hesitated. For the first time in years, he didn't know the right move. Not for his mission, not for the civilians, not for Raven. The plane shuddered violently, and the device beneath row 8 blazed a solid red, illuminating the aisle in an eerie, unnatural glow. And in that moment, everyone realized that this was no longer about escorting a civilian or completing a mission. This was about survival. And only one person held the advantage. The cabin lights flickered as Flight 417 shuddered violently through a pocket of turbulence, or something far more deliberate. Raven's eyes, calm and precise, scanned the aisle. The SEALs flanked her like shadows, their training dictating every movement, every reaction. But even their instincts weren't enough to fully read her. Passengers shrieked, gripping armrests. Overhead bins rattled, spilling magazines and small items. A toddler screamed in terror, clinging to a parent's shoulder. Yet amid the chaos, Raven remained unshaken, poised, deliberate. The leader's jaw tightened. "Everyone stay calm, keep positions." His voice was low, steady, but tension lined every word. Raven's hand brushed lightly over the black case under her seat, the same device that had turned the red warning light into a solid pulse. She lifted it carefully, almost casually, revealing a sleek, featureless box with a biometric lock and no visible controls. "This plane isn't the target," she said softly, almost conversational. "I am." The words hit like a thunderclap. The SEALs froze, instinctively moving closer, their trained reflexes reacting to a threat far beyond their expectations. The leader stepped in, his voice steady but tense. "Who sent you?" "No one," Raven replied, calm, precise. Her eyes flicked over the cabin, noting every shadow, every angle, every potential escape or attack route. "That's the problem." Suddenly, her encrypted satellite phone vibrated. "Caller ID, Priority 1. She glanced at it and answered. "Raven, we see you." The SEALs stiffened. The voice was cold, authoritative, someone who moved silently behind governments and intelligence, untouchable yet omnipresent. Raven's jaw tightened. "So it begins," she whispered. "You still have the data," the voice continued. Raven's mind raced. Kiev, the mission gone wrong, allies lost, betrayal, and the files she had recovered, the proof that could dismantle the network that had tried to bury everything. "Yes," she replied softly. "I have it, but if I use it," she glanced around at the passengers. "This plane could end up anywhere, and it won't be a drill." The leader swallowed, "Then call them off." Her eyes scanned him, calm yet piercing. "I've been left off the grid for 7 years. If I'm forced to act, it won't be a warning. It'll be a message." The SEALs were tense. The plane shuddered again, sharper this time. Outside, 2 unmarked fighter jets appeared, sleek, black, unidentifiable. No insignia, no friendly markers, just death hovering. The blinking red light beneath Raven's seat pulsed in a steady, ominous rhythm. She had activated it fully, letting the SEALs know it was live. Passengers screamed. Coffee spilled. Bags tumbled from the overhead bins. A flight attendant tried to calm passengers but froze, sensing something far beyond ordinary danger. Raven's gaze shifted back to the SEAL leader. "If you think this is about escorting me, you're wrong. This is bigger, and if I act, no one in this cabin walks away unscathed." The leader felt a flicker of panic. They had trained for hostage situations, plane interventions, and extraction missions. But this, a civilian who was a legend in intelligence circles, a live device that could potentially compromise the flight, and the unknown intentions of unmarked jets outside, nothing in his career had prepared him. Raven crouched slightly, fingertips grazing the black case. The red glow reflected against her face, turning her calm, composed expression into something almost ethereal, like a predator waiting to strike. Her eyes darted to the cockpit briefly, noting the captain's tense movements. She knew he was following protocol, but there was no time for protocol now. The SEALs tightened their formation. The leader whispered into his mic, "Keep containment. Don't engage unless necessary. She's dangerous but lethal only if provoked." Raven's lips curved into a faint, almost invisible smile. She whispered under her breath, meant only for them to hear, "Let's see who survives this flight." Suddenly the plane lurched violently. Oxygen masks dropped. Lights flickered. A nearby passenger screamed and others panicked. The SEALs' training kicked in, but even their precision was challenged. Raven lifted the device fully, pressing a small button. A soft beep sounded, barely audible, but the red glow beneath her seat shifted from pulsing to a steady, intense glow. Active, fully operational. Her gaze swept the cabin, calm, controlled, deadly. She looked to the SEAL leader. "You can walk away, now, before it's too late." The leader's mind raced. All contingencies, all plans, all training, they all collapsed into uncertainty. He had faced impossible missions, but this was a new level. The device beneath row 8 was active. The unmarked jets outside were closing in. The plane was compromised, and Raven was entirely in control. Passengers were oblivious, caught in terror, yet unaware of the true magnitude of the threat. Raven adjusted her stance, eyes scanning the cabin once more. Calm, lethal, waiting. The first move had been made. The plane, unknowingly carrying hundreds of lives, had become a battleground. And only one person controlled the outcome. The red glow beneath row 8 blazed brighter, illuminating Raven's face in an unearthly light. The SEAL leader took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he didn't know what the right move was. And somewhere, deep in the intelligence network, a file long marked inactive began blinking red again. The plane had become a living, breathing entity of tension. Every passenger was trapped in a storm they didn't understand, while Raven, the woman in row 8, stood at the eye of it, poised and deadly. Her presence dominated the cabin, her calm unnerving even the most seasoned SEALs surrounding her. The red glow beneath her seat pulsed steadily, illuminating her determined face. It was no ordinary device. It was a warning, a statement, and a key to forces far beyond anyone's comprehension on the flight. Raven glanced toward the cockpit. The captain and co-pilot were struggling to maintain course. Turbulence wasn't natural. Systems flickered. Something external was overriding the aircraft's autopilot. The unmarked fighter jets outside were close now, shadows against the night sky, silent but menacing. She turned back to the SEALs. Their containment formation remained tight, professional, but the leader's hesitation betrayed doubt. None of them had faced a civilian, an apparent ghost, who commanded such presence and respect in a single moment. "You know why I'm here," she said, her voice calm but cutting through the hum of the engines. "And if you don't, you're about to find out the hard way." A SEAL whispered to his teammate, "She's bluffing. It's a threat, but—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The leader focused on her, voice low. "This isn't a game, Raven. Hundreds of lives are at stake. Tell me what's going on now." Raven's eyes narrowed, scanning him carefully. Then she spoke, her words precise and deliberate. "This isn't about me being caught or escorted. It's about everything that went wrong 7 years ago. Kyiv, the mission, the files, and the people who tried to bury the truth." The SEALs stiffened. Memories flooded back, briefings long erased, files they were never supposed to see, ghosts of missions gone wrong. Raven had vanished, leaving chaos in her wake. Everyone thought she was dead. Everyone assumed she had disappeared, but she had been alive, and now she was back. "Who are you talking to?" the leader asked. Raven tapped her encrypted phone lightly. "Someone who always knew where I'd be, even when you didn't. They're watching, and they know I have the files, the proof, all of it." The SEAL's eyes widened. The files. The intelligence, the evidence that could topple hidden networks, agencies, and black ops programs. Raven wasn't just a civilian asset. She was a weapon and a liability. The phone buzzed again. A voice came through, calm and eerily detached. "Raven, we see you. We know you have the data. Do not attempt to use it. You know the consequences." Raven's lips tightened. "You thought I'd disappear. You thought I'd obey. But I've waited 7 years, and I've learned the rules don't apply to me anymore." The SEAL leader glanced at his team. They were professional, precise, lethal, but for the first time they were unsure of the mission. This wasn't a hostage extraction or a plain intervention. This was a retrieval, or a warning, or a trap. They couldn't tell. Raven's eyes swept across the cabin again. Calm, controlled, calculating. Her fingers brushed the device beneath her seat. The red glow reflected against her face like an omen. "You can walk away," she said quietly, addressing the SEAL leader. "You still have a chance. Walk away now before I have to make a decision you won't like." The leader's jaw tightened. He had faced impossible missions, life-and-death scenarios that had broken others. But this was different. He wasn't sure what the correct move was. Every option carried potential disaster. The plane lurched violently. Oxygen masks dropped. Screams erupted. A bag tumbled from an overhead bin, spilling its contents. The SEALs adjusted instinctively, keeping formation, but uncertainty crept in. Raven's gaze flicked toward the unmarked jets outside. Silent, deadly, shadowed. They weren't coming to intercept, they were coming to observe, or enforce, or destroy. She didn't know fully, but she could anticipate their actions. She had survived worse. Her phone vibrated again. The voice spoke with icy precision. "You always were difficult." "I know," she said softly, "but I've kept my promise." The leader stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Explain now." Raven glanced at him. The red device beneath her seat pulsed steadily, ominously. "Kyiv, the mission, the betrayal, files they tried to erase. They left me for dead, and now they want the files back. They want me gone. If I'm forced to act, hundreds of lives won't survive. That's why I'm here. That's why this plane is critical. A flash of realization crossed the SEAL leader's face. It wasn't about arresting her. It wasn't about containment. It was about control of the intelligence she possessed, and she held the leverage. The unmarked jets began to close slightly. No insignia, no signals, just deadly, precise shadows cutting through the night sky. Passengers screamed. A mother shielded her child. A man in row 11 cursed under his breath. The flight attendants were paralyzed with fear. They didn't understand what was happening, but instinct screamed that something catastrophic was imminent. Raven's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "This is your only warning. Move wrong, touch the wrong thing, or hesitate, and this plane won't land where you think it will. I decide the outcome." The SEALs exchanged glances. He knew she wasn't bluffing. She had survived impossible odds before. She wasn't humanly bluffing now. The red device beneath row 8 glowed brighter. Raven lifted it slightly, revealing its sleek, enigmatic form. No wires, no timer, no obvious controls, yet it radiated lethal potential. The leader exhaled slowly. "We're going to have to trust you," he said quietly. It was the first time he had admitted doubt in years. Raven met his eyes. "Trust me," she whispered, "or regret it. There's no middle ground." The plane lurched violently again. The jets outside flanked the aircraft now, silent sentinels in the night sky. The stakes were no longer about escape. They were about survival, strategy, and the hidden intelligence that Raven alone controlled. And for the first time, the SEALs realized. Row 8 held the key to everything. The red glow beneath her seat was no longer just a warning. It was a signal, a threat, and a promise. And as the plane leveled out slightly, Raven knew the choice she had to make. Not just for herself, not just for the SEALs, but for every soul on board. Because what happened next would determine whether Flight 417 landed safely, or became a headline no one would survive to read. The plane creaked and shuddered, 37,000 feet above the Atlantic, its metal frame groaning under unseen pressure. Outside, 2 unmarked jets flanked Flight 417 like shadows with teeth, silent hunters tracking a prey no one else could see. Inside the cabin, panic rippled among passengers. Oxygen masks hung uselessly from the ceiling. A toddler cried in row 14, clinging to a terrified mother. Coffee spilled across the aisle. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. But Raven stood perfectly still, a calm anchor amid chaos, her presence dominating the cabin. Her fingers hovered over the black device beneath her seat. The red glow pulsed steadily, casting ominous reflections on her determined face. The SEALs encircled her, taut and ready, but their movements were cautious. Even the most experienced among them understood the risk. She was unpredictable, lethal, and in full control of the unknown device beneath her. The leader stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Raven, we can't let this escalate. Hundreds of lives are at stake. Tell me what to do." Raven's eyes flicked to him, steady and piercing. "You don't get to decide. I do. This plane, these people, they're collateral if anyone underestimates me." The unmarked jets shifted formation outside, a subtle threat that was almost imperceptible but not to her trained eyes. They weren't here to escort or warn. They were here to intervene, and their intervention could trigger the device if she wasn't careful. Her fingers brushed the biometric lock. She remembered Kiev, the betrayal, the fire, the mission that ended in chaos. She had survived because she had always been one step ahead, anticipating outcomes and manipulating them before anyone else even realized. A soft beep emanated from the device. The red light beneath row 8 blazed brighter, warning of engagement. Raven's pulse remained calm, her focus absolute. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She had a plan, one only she could execute. The SEAL leader whispered to his team, "We follow her lead. Containment only. Don't touch her or the device." Raven's lips curved into a faint, deadly smile. "Good, that's smart." Passengers began to murmur nervously, sensing tension they couldn't explain. A man in row 11 whispered to his wife, "Something's wrong." "Everything's wrong," she replied silently, thinking of them all. They were innocent, but the flight had already become a battleground and the stakes were higher than anyone realized. She reached under the seat, lifting the device slightly. Its surface was smooth, black, and featureless, but she knew every function, every fail-safe, every explosive or electronic trigger. Years of preparation had led to this moment. The first unmarked jet shifted closer, a silent shadow passing near the cockpit. Raven's gaze flicked to the pilots. They were trying to regain control, unaware of the invisible threat looming inside and outside. She whispered, almost to herself, "Time to finish what they started." The SEAL leader noticed the subtle change in her posture. Raven was preparing to act, not aggressively, not recklessly, calculated, deadly, every muscle poised, every thought precise. She tapped a button on the device. A faint hum filled the cabin, imperceptible to passengers but deafening to trained ears. The red glow intensified. The unmarked jets outside hesitated, sensing the activation of something beyond their control. Raven's eyes met the leader's. Calm, precise. She didn't need to speak. He understood this was her plan, her terms. Any interference, any sudden move, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The turbulence intensified again. Oxygen masks swayed. Panic escalated, but Raven's hand remained steady. Then in a blink she pressed another control. The device emitted a soft, high-pitched frequency. The plane's external systems began to respond subtly. The autopilot adjusted, stabilizing the aircraft. The unmarked jets flinched. They had underestimated her. The SEALs exhaled slightly, realizing her strategy. Raven had used the device not as a threat, but as leverage, asserting control over every element, interior and exterior, friend and foe. She tapped the encrypted phone again. "They're watching, but they don't get to touch me or this flight or the files." A voice came through, calm, controlled. "Raven, you have leverage, but remember collateral damage." "I control it," she interrupted. "No one dies unless I allow it, not a passenger, not a SEAL, not anyone." The jets outside adjusted, maintaining distance. The threat had not vanished, but the power had shifted. The device was no longer just a tool, it was a statement. She was untouchable, in control, and deadly precise. The SEAL leader nodded subtly. He understood. Their mission was now protection, not confrontation. They flanked her, forming a shield as she executed the final phase. The plane steadied. Oxygen masks retracted. Passengers remained oblivious, thinking the worst of the turbulence had passed. Raven lowered the device, its red glow dimming slightly. She exhaled, calm but vigilant. The unmarked jets remained outside, distant shadows, reminded that power was not something to challenge lightly. The leader spoke softly, almost a whisper. "You could have killed us all, you could have used this too." Raven smiled faintly. "I survived because I knew the rules wouldn't protect me. I act with precision, not chaos." Passengers resumed tentative activity, still unaware of the storm that had raged inches above their heads. A flight attendant offered a shaky smile. Raven glanced at her, then returned to her seat, sitting as if nothing had occurred. Calm, ordinary, invisible to everyone else. The SEAL leader exhaled, a mixture of relief and awe. They had entered a mission expecting control, expecting order. Instead, they had witnessed the return of a ghost, a civilian who was anything but ordinary, a woman who had survived betrayal, war, and disappearance, and had returned to assert dominance over life, death, and secrets no one else could touch. Raven glanced down at the device beneath her seat one last time. The red light dimmed, returning to a soft glow. Her eyes flicked toward the window, catching the reflection of the jets outside. Silent, observing, waiting. And she knew this was only the beginning. Because legends like Raven never fade. They don't disappear. They wait, they calculate, and when the moment comes, they decide the rules for everyone else. The plane cruised steadily, the passengers oblivious, the SEALs vigilant but awed. And row 8, seat B, remained the calm eye of a storm that no one dared challenge. For Raven, survival was never a choice, it was a promise. And she had kept it. The red glow blinked softly once more. And somewhere far away, a network that had thought itself untouchable realized the ghost was back.